He has been a part of Green Lake for a good portion of the 29 years that we've been here. And I think many of us have very fond memories of perhaps he and Mr. Bill Sears playing golf on stage. Do any of you remember that? Would you please give a very warm, friendly welcome to Auxiliary Board Member Stephen Birkland.
Thank you very much, Rick. After all that we did last night and all of these wonderful speakers and the good food and the sleeping, or not so much sleeping, actually, I was concerned that maybe I would put you to sleep this morning, and I said to my wife, I'm really worried. And she said, if you want to be assured of really bringing these people closer to God and not putting them to sleep, try to get them all in your car, because anytime anyone rides with you, they pray like crazy. Well, actually, I had another title for this presentation this morning, and that was, Our Goal is in Sight. All right. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. Insight. Because it seems that as we go on, as we approach this, the darkest hour before the dawn, as the Universal House of Justice said, we've now arrived at the darkest hour before the dawn. As we approach this, the end of the century that's going to bring about this lesser peace and the maturation of the assemblies and so on, so many things have to happen. As Baha'is, as parents, as committee members, as peacemakers, teachers, and so on, we have to make decisions like that are congruent with the teachings of the faith. And we don't have time, really. We really don't have that much time to sit and think, now, how would Abdu'l-Baha act, and how would Abdu'l-Baha make this decision, and what spiritual principles are involved, and let me think, and so on. Really, because of the speed that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, because of the acceleration of this process, there are these processes that are transforming the planet, we have to make decisions like that. We don't even have time to think. We have to have these spiritual instincts, really. And that requires a tremendous amount of creative thinking, because the problems are just overwhelming, it seems. And so I thought about this a while, and I attended a seminar not long ago on creative thinking. And it wasn't presented by a Baha'i, it was presented by a professor who is a woman that teaches in the Minneapolis area, and she actually teaches at a university there at a place called the Center for the Study of Creativity. And so I thought, for sure we can find out about creativity here. And I went to this seminar, and it seems that she outlines some different kinds of thinking that people are engaged in normally. She talked about concrete thinking, how we just think about things that we really can see and touch and smell and so on, that kind of thinking. Then she mentioned that above that concrete kind of thinking, these are her terms and so on, is something she called abstract thinking. That's where we think about things that we can't see and touch and so on. After that, she said, comes imaginary thinking. Imaginary thinking, that's where we actually can imagine things we haven't even seen. Or we can imagine putting things together, two things that we've seen but we haven't seen them together, but we can put them together in our mind. Imaginary thinking. And she said, but that's not the greatest kind of creative thinking, imaginary thinking. She said the greatest kind, and I was really bracing, what is the greatest kind? She said the greatest kind of creative thinking is something that she calls visionary thinking. And I thought, well, this is quite congruent here with the or consistent with the theme of Green Lake, and I better pay attention to this visionary thinking. It seems that Abdu'l-Baha explained that there are certain pillars which have been established as the unshakable supports of the faith of God. Certain pillars. And the mightiest of these is learning and use of the mind. The expansion of consciousness and insight into the realities of the universe and the hidden mysteries of Almighty God. These are the mightiest, this is the mightiest unshakable supports of the faith of God, is our use of our mind and insight into the mysteries. According to Baha'u'llah, the thing that distinguishes us from all of the other things that that God created is this gift of understanding. Foremost among all the favors that God has given us is the gift of understanding. Baha'u'llah said that this gift giveth man the power to discern the truth in all things, leadeth him to that which is right, and helpeth him to discover the secrets of creation. Because, we don't want to make mistakes, and as Nigel has mentioned yesterday, we have to constantly pray that we are able to distinguish every foul smell from the fragrance of the spiritual reality that Baha'u'llah brought. That we can distinguish, so that anytime we're making a decision about our own personal lives, or in our role, as I mentioned, as parents or employees, or any kind of role that we're in, committee members and so on, spouses, that we would always make a decision like that that's consistent with the spiritual teachings of Baha'u'llah, so that we can distinguish the foul smell of a bad decision, that we wouldn't decide to act or think in that way. And this gift of understanding helps us to figure it out. In fact, that's what distinguishes us from animals and other parts of creation, Baha'u'llah said. But Baha'u'llah also said that next in rank to this gift of vision we have is the power, next in rank to this gift of understanding we have is the power of vision. He said, next in rank, these are the words of the Blessed Beauty, Baha'u'llah. Next in rank is the power of vision, the chief instrument whereby his understanding can function. So even if our eyesight were perfect, which mine isn't, but even if our eyesight were perfect, if we could only see this much, we could only see what's within that range, right? So Baha'u'llah said, let your vision be world-embracing rather than confined to your own self. And the more broad our vision is, the more we can understand. We might be able to, because of this gift of understanding that we all possess, we can help figure out the mysteries within our range. But the more limited our vision is, the more limited our understanding is. And the more limited our understanding is, the less power we have to help transform our own lives and the planet. So, the key then, it seems, is to make our vision broad. Make our vision broad. Because, well, let me read something from Abdu'l-Baha. Abdu'l-Baha said in one tablet, he said, O handmaid of God, although the reality of divinity is sanctified and boundless, the aims and needs of the creatures are restricted. God's grace is like the rain, Abdu'l-Baha said. God's grace is like the rain that cometh down from heaven. The water is not bounded by limitations of form. Yet on whatever place it poureth down, it taketh on limitations, dimensions, appearance, shape, according to the characteristics of that place. In a square pool, the water, previously unconfined, becomes a square. In a 6-sided pool, it becomes a hexagon. In an 8-sided pool, an octagon, and so forth, the Master explained. The rain itself hath no geometry, no limits, no form, but it taketh on one form or another according to the restrictions of the vessel. In the same way, the holy essence of the Lord God is boundless, immeasurable, but His graces and splendors become finite in the creatures because of their limitations. So, Baha'u'llah has come and revealed so much truth, that the beloved guardian said that his influence will affect the planet and the people on the planet for the next 5,000 centuries. That's how much truth Baha'u'llah has revealed. For the next 5,000 centuries. And we have the power as individuals to understand it all, to understand all these mysteries. But our understanding can only work according to how broad our vision is, because that's the chief instrument through which our understanding can function. So we can figure out all the mysteries, solve all the problems, come up with incredible creative solutions according to our vision. According to our vision. Because all of the things that have been bestowed upon us, all of the truth, all of the, even the power to accomplish the tasks is limitless. But we're the instruments through which all of that functions. Our minds, our understanding, determine what comes out. And they're restricted and limited. So our goal really, in a way, as Baha'is, is to destroy all those limitations. And as Baha'i teachers, really you might think that the Baha'i peace plan, the Baha'i peace plan has to do with destroying limitations. That's our goal, is destroying limitations. Abdu'l-Baha once, in a talk, said, he was talking about the different kinds of unities. You've heard this, I'm sure. You've read it. I'm quite confident. He said, what is real unity? When we observe the human world, we find various collective expressions of unity therein. A distinction exists between various groups of humankind according to lineage, each group forming a racial unity separate from the others. There's also unity of tongue among those who have the same language as a means of communication. There's national unity, where various peoples live under one form of government, and political unity. All these unities, he goes on and on, but he says, all these unities are imaginary. They're all imaginary and without real foundation. For no real result proceeds from them. The purpose of true unity is real and divine outcomes. It seems that the things that are preventing, that are restricting us, are the limitations of our minds. We tend to see people as one race, as a certain race, or of different a tongue or lineage, or from a different country or a political persuasion, and so on. And all these unities are imaginary because they're limited, and only limited results can come from them. From real and divine unity, unlimited results can occur. And that's what's required, because the problems of the world are so overwhelming. We need tremendous, visionary, creative solutions. So our goal really, in a way, is to destroy these limitations. But how do we do that? You know, I'll give you an example. That I thought of recently. Let me read it from Abdu'l-Baha. Abdu'l-Baha, because I was reading about trying to improve our marriage, of course, constantly trying to improve our marriage. We have a blissful relationship. But I know that that's my measurement, and my mind is limited, and I know that it's nothing compared to what it could become. So I was reading recently about marriage, and I read that the true marriage of Baha'is is this: that the husband and wife should be united, both physically and spiritually. And then I came across this line, that they may ever improve the spiritual life of each other. That they may ever improve the spiritual life of each other. And I thought, now how do we improve the spiritual life of our spouse? And it occurred to me, that we could start by pointing out all the limitations that they may not be aware of. It didn't work. Just the opposite happened. No. I thought, but sometimes we're like that. We have a plant and we want to help it grow and we think, grow! And we're trying to pull it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. Prune it up, and this and that. Making the plant grow like that doesn't work at all. I think John Hatcher mentioned yesterday, in fact, he said that we can't make anybody more spiritual. So now how do we do that? That's something that Abdu'l-Baha said about the husband and wife. The Baha'is, we should help improve the spiritual life of the other. And I thought, well, now let's use this metaphor of the plant. That's not going to work. We're just, I end up with a dead plant. So that's not going to work. How are we going to do this? And it occurred to me that if we have this plant, we give it nutrition, all right? And we water it, and we put sunshine on it, and we have lots of patience, and it grows. And I thought, that's it. How do we, as Baha'is, our peace plan now, imagine if our peace plan is destroying all these limitations and restrictions. Because they're all imaginary. They're not real. When Baha'u'llah came, he said that specifically. In fact, I even wrote this down. Baha'u'llah said I think this is in the Lahidunya, the tablet of the world. Baha'u'llah wrote, through the power released by these exalted words, he hath lent a fresh impulse and set a new direction to the birds of men's hearts, and hath obliterated every trace of restriction and limitation from God's holy book. So the Baha'i faith is absolutely unlimited, unrestricted. And so our peace plan then, we're going around, just like the husband and the wife, trying to help improve the spiritual life of everyone on the planet, including ourselves. How do we do that? And I thought, yesterday, I'm just going to take a second to pull this blackboard over. I guess it was Friday night, we talked about the fact that we have this goal. Now the goal for the Baha'is, what would be the goal? Obviously, it would be Abdu'l-Baha. He's the perfect exemplar. So our goal as a Baha'i is to be like Abdu'l-Baha. If we want to improve our spiritual life, we try to be more like Abdu'l-Baha. It's very simple to understand. To try to be more like Abdu'l-Baha is our goal. Then we need something that's very important. Baha'u'llah says that we should take ourselves to account each night, each day. We should ask ourselves, how did we do? Were we better? And so on. This is something that we might call self-examination, self-analysis. We have to constantly look at ourselves. But that's not easy to do because, as Dr. Hatcher pointed out, we have this incredible mind that we can even fool ourselves. We have such an incredible mind, we can even fool ourselves. And so, figuring out where we are in relationship to this goal. Where we are in relationship to this goal. Are we here? On what side of this goal? What direction should we take? And every day we have to constantly ask ourselves, where are we in relationship to this goal of Abdu'l-Baha? And in order for us to have an accurate self-analysis, which is really, really important, because remember, those of you who are here Friday night heard me say that if we think that we're here and we take this direction, but we're really here and take that direction, we're going to miss. So we have to figure out where we are. Now, I thought, how do we... One of the things that is important in this accurate self-analysis is having some kind of non-judgmental atmosphere. Because if anybody thinks, if I think somebody's judging me, I'm not going to probably, if I think they're looking very closely at me, and if I make a mistake, they're going to laugh at me and humiliate me and so on, then it's going to be one of those things like, I'm not sure I want to take any risks. I'm not sure I want to have a good look at myself because I don't want anyone to make fun of me. In fact, we grew the most of us did anyway, when we were real young and we had this mother, most of us, that had unconditional love for us. Unconditional love. Because when we have unconditional love, no matter what we do, no matter how stupid it is, we always just get loved. And in that atmosphere, in that kind of environment, we'll take any kind of risk. We'll try anything. Because we know that even if we fall down and scrape our nose, no one laughs at us and humiliates us. They just keep loving us. So in that atmosphere, we can take a good look at ourselves and we can take plenty of risks. But as soon as we get out into the world, it seems, as soon as the child goes out into the world, they start having people make fun of them and humiliate them and embarrass them and so on and laugh at them when they make mistakes. And as a result, little by little, the child begins to stop taking risks because they don't want to be embarrassed. This isn't fun at all. And as an adult then, if we grow up in that situation where there isn't a lot of encouragement and love, we're not very good risk takers. And as a result, we don't grow. We don't grow. In fact, we become more limited in our thinking. We become more rigid in our thinking. More restrictions set in the way we look at life. And we're not interested in discovering the mysteries of creation anymore. We're interested in just in preserving ourselves, right, from humiliation and embarrassment. So one of the things that seems very important to me, even as a husband, I think, what can I do to help my wife grow spiritually? Well, unconditional love to begin with. Constant encouragement. None of this pointing out all the faults and stuff. I'm convinced that all of you have this gift of understanding. Baha'u'llah said it. And you have this vision. And the one thing that I could do for you that would be greater than anything else that I could do as a fellow human being would be to love you unconditionally. So that whenever you're around me, you just feel this love. You feel like you could say anything and do anything and try anything and think anything. There's no limitation, no restrictions. And that's the way it is in the Baha'i community, or at least that's what we're trying to accomplish in the Baha'i community. And that's the Baha'i peace plan. How, really, as Baha'i teachers, how do we help somebody solve a problem? How do we help somebody solve a problem? There are all these tremendous problems, and we're walking around as Baha'is thinking we've got the solutions. Well, just offering the solutions might be regarded as an indication that they're not doing it right. So maybe the first thing we have to do is remember that they're a creation of God and they've got this gift of understanding, and the best thing we could do is to help broaden their vision. And the best way to do that would be to love them. Just totally accept them. And that will help them overcome their limitations, because then they'll begin to take risks. It seems that that the Universal House of Justice has asked us in this position statement on peace that they wrote, that one of the ways that Baha'is offer to solve problems, one of the ways that the Baha'is solve problems is by applying the spiritual principle. Not just looking for pragmatic solutions, because unfortunately, when we are just looking for pragmatic solutions, we're probably in the concrete or abstract or maybe imaginary levels of creative thinking. But when we consider spiritual principles, something magical happens. And the Universal House of Justice describes it. I have it here in a copy of the peace statement. The Universal House of Justice describes it. They said, the other point is that the primary challenge in dealing with issues of peace is to raise the context to the level of principle, as distinct from pure pragmatism. They said, there are spiritual principles, or what some call human values, by which solutions can be found for every social problem. So as Baha'is, whenever we are faced with any kind of problem, whether it's as a parent or a spouse or anything, an employee or anything, we think, first of all, what is the root cause of this problem? And then what are the spiritual principles involved? The other day, my children were fighting. Sometimes they do that. Not very often, but sometimes my two sons were fighting. And one came crying to me, and the younger one came crying to me, and he was just so hurt and so on. I said, what happened? And he said, my brother called me a dumbhead. And I thought, oh boy, this is a good opportunity for me to teach the children about applying the spiritual principles and so on. And so I brought them together and I said, now we're going to consult about how to solve this problem. And I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say to each other, we're going to try to determine what spiritual principles might apply in this case. And the older one said, how about truthfulness? So then, and the little one he just kept crying, and I said, well, now, let's consider some other ones. Maybe how about courtesy? And we went on, and it was wonderful how it turned out. But I think as Baha'is, there is something about applying the spiritual principle. There's something about applying the spiritual principle that's just magic. And the Universal House of Justice explains it. They say that any well-intentioned group can, in a general sense, devise practical solutions to its problems, but good intentions and practical knowledge are usually not enough. The essential merit in spiritual principle is that it not only presents a perspective which harmonizes with that which is immanent in human nature. In other words, our vision becomes totally broad, wide open, when we consider the spiritual principle. Because there's no limitations to what comes down from God. There's no limitations, as Abdu'l-Baha said. The rain doesn't have any form. And when we consider the spiritual principles, our mind totally opens up to the possibilities of everything. But the House of Justice also pointed out that when we consider the spiritual principle involved, it also induces an attitude, a dynamic, a will, an aspiration which facilitate the discovery and implementation of practical measures. So in addition, when we consider spiritual principle, it gives us energy, an attitude, a dynamic, a will, an aspiration. And partially, so many times when people are trying to figure out solutions to problems, they come up with okay solutions, fairly good solutions and so on, but sometimes they're so pooped after the process that they don't have the energy to carry it out. The House of Justice points out that when we consider spiritual principles, it gives us energy, dynamic, will, aspiration. We want to execute this as well when we come up with these practical solutions. And they're based on something that has no limitations or restrictions. So they're bound to apply to everybody. They're bound to apply to everybody, not just certain groups will benefit from these solutions. And they're bound to work because at the core, they're spiritual. At the core, they're spiritual. Well, I want to share with you one other dimension to this all this that I've been talking about, of these making decisions as Baha'is. And that is something that the Universal House of Justice said. I've talked about this before. And they said that events of the most profound significance are taking place in the world. The river of human history is flowing at a bewildering speed. I mentioned on Friday night about the twin processes, the processes of disintegration and integration. You know how on one hand all the barriers, all the restrictions are being obliterated by the force of this revelation. And anything, in any institution, whether it's a social, educational, religious, political institutions, business institutions, any institution that's based on any ideology or any theory that's restricted or limited in any way is crumbling. The only thing that's left standing in the world today is something that's not restricted, that's based on complete and total unity of all the people of the world. Integration, this process of integration, which is really the part that we're playing such a role in. And that is, as people become more desperate, and as people in the world become more receptive to creative possibilities, the Baha'is are tooling around offering all these great solutions. And this process is accelerating. It's flowing at a bewildering speed. In fact, the House of Justice said the observable acceleration during the past decade of the twin processes described by our beloved guardian, the disintegration of the old order and the progress and consolidation of the new order of Baha'u'llah, may well come to be regarded by future historians as one of the most remarkable features of this period. In fact, they said the recent increase in this very acceleration is even more remarkable. Well, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is that the speed at which things are happening in the world are requiring us no decompression time. We have to make decisions like that, one after another. We don't have time to go meditate and walk in the woods and then take a deep breath and say, sit down and consult and this and that. We have to make decisions like that constantly as we go out into what Dr. Hatcher said, the real world. Constantly we have to make these decisions so fast. That's the bad news. And it's happening faster and faster all the time. The good news is, imagine this for a minute. When you're... Close your eyes. Imagine this. Close your eyes. You're walking across the lawn at Green Lake. You're walking across the lawn. Now you decide to go right. And you turn. Right on a dime, you turn. And you go left. You turn just like that. You can make the sharpest turn when you're going slow. Now imagine yourself, if possible, with that bear on your back, as Dr. Hedger said, running like crazy across the lawn at Green Lake. You're running as fast as you possibly can go. Now turn right real fast. See, it's almost impossible. You'd probably twist your ankle if you were like me. In other words, there's something about speed that confines our direction. And so as Baha'is, even though there's an acceleration in the processes of the disintegration and integration occurring in the world, and we have to make decisions faster and faster, there's something about this speed that's good. All right? In other words, our steps, because we pray for firmness in the covenant, and because we're constantly thinking about those spiritual principles, as we become so firm in this covenant, and as the speed of the twin processes transforming the planet accelerate, even an increase in this acceleration, our decision-making process as Baha'is becomes so confined by speed that we don't make mistakes. We don't make mistakes even. It's so confined by that speed. Like there was a poem that I read a few years ago at Green Lake that talked about this. That we're going so fast that what happens is that our feet belong exactly where they land. The poem said, our feet belong exactly where they land because of the speed. So that's the good news. Well, I want to just share with you something in conclusion. And that is that there's another dimension to all this that we can sometimes forget. It seems funny that we'd forget it but as we're thinking about solving all these problems and considering the principles and so on and finding out the root causes of these problems and going about the process in our committees and as parents and so on, sometimes we forget As even when we're describing to this faith and the lack of limitations and restrictions to our friends, teaching non-Baha'is and so on, sometimes we forget that this is a religion. And that one of the key elements in all of this is the power of God, the power of divine assistance. And I wanted to share with you something that Abdu'l-Baha wrote about this. He wrote, "Be not grieved at the smallest of your number, and thank God for the power of your spirits. He shall assist you with such a confirmation, whereat minds will be astonished and souls will be amazed. Be ye assured with the greatest assurance that verily God will help those who are firm in His covenant in every matter, through His confirmation and favor, the lights of which will shine forth unto the east of the earth as well as the west thereof. He will make them the signs of guidance among the creation, and as shining and glittering stars from all horizons." The thing about creative thinking that the Baha'is have a corner on is something called the creative word. You know, create means, it seems to me, to generate something that didn't exist before. And that's really what visionary creative thinking is all about. We're hopeless, all right? We're hopeless. There's no solution to our problems. But in our minds, because of the gift of understanding and the vision that we get and the power of divine assistance, we can actually conceive thoughts and solutions in our minds that no human being has ever thought of before. An absolute original thought. And it's possible through the creative word, because that's what the creative word means. And you're so precious. You're so precious because you know this, and you're using the creative word as a Baha'is. And you really should be thankful at this time. Because you know, the stage is set, the House of Justice said, for rapid, universal, massive growth of the cause of God. 1,000-fold increase. 1,000-fold increase. What do we have? 1,200 people here? What's that going to be? Over 1 million people. If there's 1,000-fold increase. So think about this in conclusion. Abdu'l-Baha once was walking along the slopes of Mount Carmel. And as he was walking and talking to some of the believers that were with him, some students from Beirut, he looked down and he noticed that he was walking on a bed of violets. They were all around, beautiful violets in bloom. And they were walking across this bed of violets, and Abdu'l-Baha stopped and he said, "You know, when we were in Baghdad," you know, Abdu'l-Baha was exiled with his father to Baghdad, Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah left just as soon after he arrived in Baghdad for this time in the wilderness, like all of the prophets of God. He spent 2 years in Kurdistan, in the mountains of Azerbaijan. And it was a horrible time for Abdu'l-Baha and his younger sister, Bahir Khanum, and his mother, Navam. It was a horrible time. The faith was in disarray. There wasn't the leadership from the Blessed Beauty, even though he hadn't declared his mission yet as Baha'u'llah. It was an awful time. His faithless half-brother, Mirza Yahya, was sort of running the home, and he was so afraid to even go out on the streets, so that he locked the doors and wouldn't let these children go out and play and so on. And it was just an awful time for these exiles. And Abdu'l-Baha said that during this time, he said, we had one pot, and it had a violet plant in it. And every time that violet bloomed, we were so happy. And we gathered around and we looked at it and we enjoyed its beauty, and it was so precious to us, this violet plant we had. And he said, now look it, we're just walking on them. He said, these violets are like the believers. He said, when there's just a few, they're so precious because what they contribute to the cause, what they contribute at this time is magnificent. Can't be measured. Can't be measured. The contribution of just a few of us at this time is incredible. He said, but in the future, it's going to be like these violets covering all of the mountain. They're not going to be so precious. He said, look, we're walking on them, Abdu'l-Baha explained. We're just walking on them in Baghdad. We stood around and we admired just this one violet plant we had. And that's the way the believers are. And the House of Justice said, now that the stage is set, that we stand on the verge of this 1,000-fold increase in these believers. And each one of you as Baha'is are like that violet. And you're so precious now, but not for long. Not for long. You'll always be precious in the sight of God and your fellow believers, of course. But you're so precious right now because you have the mind and you have this gift of understanding and you have the vision that comes from the creative word. And because of this, you're not concerned if things run their course contrary to your cherished desire, as Baha'u'llah said. You're not concerned. You're not concerned with the things going by like that because you've had your thoughts and your vision fixed on the horizon of what's revealed in the holy tablets. And as a result, what you can contribute at this time is immeasurable. We can't even imagine it. We can't even visualize it. Thank you for it.
But it's kindred spirit. There's only one spirit involved here.
Do you still have your programs by chance? Pull it out and join in with us on the chorus. My cold is getting the better part of me today, so you have to put up with whatever occurs there.
Good luck.
Thanks.
There's a vision, I'm told, of a garden of peace, where the colors of eternity shine on in every soul, and the truth of equality blossoms in the sun. It's the light of reality, and it's clear the time has come. If our vision is clear, if we follow the light, then the world will become what we see. Let our vision be clear. Let us follow the light to a world of peace and beauty and a future so bright. In this vision I've seen a world of great peace, where our nations weave a rainbow of peace and unity, and religions blend to prisons, reflecting one God's light. We'll rejoice in our serenity that illuminates this new world. If our vision is clear, Come on, sing it out now.
if we follow the light, then the world will become what we see. Let our vision be clear. Let us follow the light to a world of peace and beauty and a future so
beauty as bright and shining stars. We will glow with the attributes of godliness revealed. We rejoice in the serenity that illuminates this new world. If our vision is clear, if we follow the light, then the world will become what we see. Let our vision be clear. Let us follow the light to a world of peace and beauty and a future so bright. To a world of peace and beauty and a future so bright.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the committee for inviting us. We really appreciate it.